Well, thank you everybody for coming this evening. And this is Career Conversations. Would be nice if I knew where I was um, for March of 2023. And we are so happy to have Kim Charlson, Executive Director of the Perkins Talking Book and Braille Library with us. And Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you to give our code. Oh, okay. Thank you again, Kim, for coming, and thank you everybody for joining Career Conversations. We have Kim here tonight to discuss her job as a librarian. And Kim, if you could tell us a little bit about how maybe your duties have evolved over the time you've been with Perkins, and how long have you been there?
Sure. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to people looking at career options and thinking about what they want to try to do. So I'm gonna start a little bit at kind of the beginning. I have a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in library science. So let me start with the bachelor's degree part because it kind of leads into the library science.
Sure.
I was intending when I went to college, I was going to be an attorney. I wanted to work on civil rights stuff and advocacy and a lot of that kind of thing. And when I became a senior in college, I got really tired of being a student. So I don't expect that that's a whole lot different from most other people. And I kind of said, I just don't feel like I should go into law school right now. I think I should try maybe getting a job, figuring out what I want to do, because I'm just not feeling like I'm connecting with going to school for 3 more years. So I made that choice, and I started looking for a position, and I found a job with the Oregon Braille and Talking Book Library program. And I worked there for 5 years. I was originally hired to be their volunteer coordinator and their audiobook volunteer trainer for a home-based recording program where many of you who might be a little older might remember the days when you got textbooks that sounded like they were recorded in someone's kitchen by a volunteer who, could barely read sometimes. That's kind of how my program started, but I was very happy to be able to notch up the quality a bit. So my first job was training volunteers to be Braillists and narrators in the talking book program in Oregon. And I really liked working in a library. I was the only blind person in the whole state library agency. And, a lot of decisions kept happening. And then I'd find out about them and I would say, wow, why did you decide to do that? And kind of things like, I don't know anybody in the blind community who uses that program or who does that or anything. And, not that I knew everybody, but it was really clear to me early on that decisions were being made by well-meaning people, librarians and people that wanted to do the right thing, but there wasn't that connection to our community of blind people, which I think I've always believed is incredibly important. And I started thinking, bosses come and bosses go, and maybe I could be a boss. But if I don't go to library school and get a degree in library and information science, I will not have that opportunity because that's a requirement generally to be a library director. Not always, but probably 95 to 98% of the time it's a requirement. So there's specialized training. So, it could have been fate. It could have been my boss was hoping I'd go away because I was a pain. I don't know. But one day I came back to my desk from my lunch break, and there was this whole folder of information on my desk about a fellowship for
In Braille?
No, but close. It
Oh,
was a
okay.
fellowship. It was not in Braille, but the information was about a fellowship for students with disabilities to go into the field of library science. And I
Wow.
said, wow, this is like an omen or something. I cannot ignore this. And so I applied for the fellowship. It was a national fellowship and I won. And what it was full tuition and a stipend and books and everything I needed to go to library school. So the one proviso was the university that was offering this was the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas. I was in Salem, Oregon. And so I had to, make a decision. And I basically said to my husband, Brian, you don't mind if I go away for a year and get my master's degree in library science and you stay here and take care of the bills or the bill collectors, whichever come first, while I'm away. And, and I'm going to go get my degree because I want to be a director of a library that provides services to people with disabilities in the NLS Talking Book program. So at that time, there was no one who was leading a library anywhere in the NLS network, the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled of the Library of Congress network, who was blind or, was a real user of the services and could really provide, connected feedback and input about the kinds of service that we would like to have. So I went, and the only housing I could get when I went to Texas was in the freshman girls dorm. And by this time I was about 26 years old. I was married. I had a seeing eye dog. And so, the 18-year-old girls thought I was like magic. I was married. I was 26. I had this gorgeous dog. I was just amazing. So they were really super nice and wonderful. They were young, but they were nice and wonderful, so, and it was fun. And that's where I lived for a year. I went to all, classes, did all my work. It was fabulous. And I would always say to my professors, now you realize that there's a whole population of people who have print disabilities. Do you talk about that in your class ever? I think they were really happy when I went away because I would always point out to them, that there's a population that gets forgotten in library service, and I don't want you to forget them. So let's talk about it. So I got my degree in a year. I went back to the Oregon State Library, but about 3 months later, this organization contacted me called Perkins School for the Blind. And they said, we read an article about you. You just got your degree and you want to work in a talking book and Braille library. And we're looking for a deputy director. Would you be interested in interviewing for the position? So I said, yes, it's Perkins. I mean, all I knew about Perkins was that's where my Brailler came from when I was a little kid, my first Braille writer. And that it must be a pretty amazing place if they could make a Braille writer that did, was so good and was so wonderful. And so I said, well, of course, that was all I knew at the time. But I said, it's got to be a great place. And so I interviewed and they offered me the job. And it was a hard choice because it was 3,000 miles and I didn't really know anybody in Watertown, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston. But I said, this is just exactly what I wanted to do. So I obviously made the decision to take the job and I relocated to Boston. And I have never looked back. It was the best thing I ever did because there's just been so many fabulous opportunities. And I'll stop talking for a moment so you can ask another question, because that's kind of where my journey started, which I thought might be helpful for people to understand.
Good. Yes. Yes. And so now, over the years that you've been with the library, can you speak about how your job duties may have evolved and changed, and maybe a little bit about how a librarian working not in a management role like yourself
Mhm.
might experience things differently.
Absolutely. So when I started, I was hired as kind of a deputy director, assistant director, and special services librarian. So one of my responsibilities was I was basically the Braille librarian. I took care of all of the patrons who needed Braille services. And that was probably about 3 to 4,000 Braille readers in all the states that Massachusetts provides Braille services for: Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Massachusetts when I first started. Now we also serve Tennessee, Washington, D.C., and North Carolina. Um, so I had to, create sort of processes that worked for me. The person that did that job before did it all on paper. Um, it was just barely getting computerized, so I was involved in sort of bringing it online. I've been with Perkins for almost 38 years. I started there thinking, oh, I'll be here like 5 or 10 years. This will be a great place to work, and then I'll move on. And somehow Perkins just became a kind of place it is a wonderful place to work. And I was fortunate in 2001 to be promoted to the role of director. But as I was starting out for 16 years as the deputy director, I did a lot of library kinds of work. I was involved in our automation process. And most of the time what I said is, you have to make sure it's accessible. It needs to work with my screen reader, and I was a real
Yep.
nag about that. But I said, I need to be able to do everything here that everybody else does. You
Mhm.
can't say, well, that function isn't going to work for me. So I was fortunate to be able to be involved in the automation transition, because so many times for blind people working, they don't get a voice in that process of upgrading, or we're changing software or that
Mhm.
kind of thing. And it happens after the fact, and then you go in to try to do your job and things don't work. So it's really important. If I could say anything to managers, I would say loudly and clearly, if you have any employees who use assistive technology, you must engage them in some of the testing. If you're considering a new piece of software, you need to engage them so that they can test it, so that you don't bring on software that's not accessible and create a barrier for a good employee that works for you to to uh, to do their job, or to prevent you from hiring other people who use screen readers and assistive technology. So my job duties did evolve as I became, more involved in direct management. But I still, even today, have things that I kind of make myself do in order to not to have stepped away from the direct service part of being a librarian. I love the policy stuff. I do budgets. I do a lot of consulting and collaborating with other librarians, both public and special, to talk about how can they make their programs more accessible. But I always make sure that, part of the time I answer the phone to talk to everybody. It helps me to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of what library patrons are wanting to talk about, what they need. Are they having problems? What are the trends? And I also have my Tennessee people, as I call them. So at our library, different librarians provide Braille service to different states and the people in those states. And I'm the librarian that handles the people who get Braille services from Tennessee that we provide services for. So I call them my Tennessee people. And I do just about everything for them. So that keeps me involved. It keeps me engaged. I make sure that everything, whenever there's an upgrade of our software, that it's going to work at all levels. Because one thing I've done as I've gone into management is I have made it a real point to, wherever I can, I try to hire other people who are blind or have low vision. And so I have a staff of 35 people. And let's see, I have 8 people who work for me who are blind or have low vision. One is absolutely low vision. My deputy director, he uses Zoom text on his computer. And then I have other staff in a variety of roles in my shipping department, in my outreach department, in my Braille production department. So, and I have an assistive technology specialist who provides support for library borrowers who are having trouble with Bard, doing their downloads, trying to get their e-reader to work so they can download a Braille book and read it, things like that. So I have a couple trainers who are also blind who do home-based training for supporting some of the assistive technology work we do in the library. So I've really tried to make a point to hire other people who are blind or have low vision, but I always tell them that what I have incredibly high expectations of every single one of you. And, my expectation is you're going to be very hardworking. You're going to do your job. You're going to do it well. I'm going to support you. If you need technology, let me know. But my expectations are high, and I want to see that you do everything that your potential is met or exceeded, because I really, I don't like average. I like people who excel and work really hard. So
So to the end of technology, I couldn't agree more that it's important to always be pushing for accessibility with technology or with office equipment, things like that. How important do you think, and do you have any recommendations of how people can work on bettering their technology skills and things along those lines?
yeah,
Um,
that
I
is absolutely one of the very important things. I've talked to a lot of people who are considering going into the field of library science, and they're going to library school, they're blind, they want to know, how am I going to get a job? And I said, there's a lot of interest in assistive technology. And the more you can know and the more proficient you can be at screen reader technology, magnification, just super strong skills in Word, in using a web browser, and Braille displays. If you have that skill, that's something that a lot of network libraries are very interested in, is people who can support the new e-readers that the Library of Congress is distributing. And most libraries don't have a Braille expert on their staff. I'm fortunate to have like 3 people that use Braille displays and are very knowledgeable, so we can always answer our patron questions about Braille displays that come up. But I think what I've told several people wanting to go into the library science field is you have to find a niche that's going to make you more valuable and more of a terrific find for a library that wants to hire you. You can't just be one more library science graduate in line waiting to apply for a job that they're going to interview. Why? What's your hook going to be? What are you going to be able to provide them that nobody else is likely to be able to provide them? And I think right now in our field, that is a solid, strong knowledge of a variety, as many kinds of assistive technology as you can be familiar with. And that includes like Kindle, and how could people use Kindle with assistive technology? Any of the platforms like Libby or Oregon Kindle, Apple Books. So this these are all things that I think can really help someone when they're thinking about how they want to go into the field of library science. And James, my deputy director, I mentioned he's legally blind. He has a degree in library science as well. My other staff who work for me they don't have library science degrees, but they're working in a library. They're in responsible job roles. One is in outreach and programming, because we do a lot of events through my library with Zoom, like this, interviews, author talks, book discussion groups, things like that, that people can participate on Zoom. So she's an expert in Zoom and connecting people. And then I have Corey, who is an assistive technology expert. So I think it's definitely, think about assistive technology and how you can get those skills. The actual assistive technology training, because Lori, you asked, how can people get that? Well, I think that varies so much from state to state where there's opportunities, but there are also ways to look at credentialing yourself, getting a certificate in different applications. There's CADIS, certification that you could be a certified assistive technology instructor, specialist. I probably got those acronyms wrong, but I think those are all helpful credentials for somebody looking for work in the library setting, to be able to show and document your level of expertise, and really working on growing your knowledge of assistive technology, because that is the area where I see more people getting hired in the library world. So.
And Lori, you're muted, I think. Are you ready? You want to take some questions from chat? We have a couple that have come in.
I'm certainly ready. I don't.
All right. I think Lori might be having some technical issues.
Okay.
So, we will start asking a question in chat, asking about Kindle. You mentioned Kindles, and so asking about if accessibility has improved to be able to read Kindle books. Do you know anything about
well,
that?
it has. There is speech on Fire tablets. Voice View is what it's called. It's Amazon's screen reader. And most recently, the technology has improved for connecting Braille displays to Kindles, so that you can actually read Kindle books with a Braille display. So
That's good to know.
It is much better than it used to be. And I'm hoping, Katie, that if anybody's interested in having my email, you certainly have authority to share it with them if they have specific questions. I'm not going to go into the how do you go about doing it, but I can do that more one-on-one with people if they have questions. And I did just get a memo from the library somewhere, the Library of Congress or someplace I read within the last probably 3 or 4 days, about how the accessibility to Kindle books has really improved, especially with Braille displays. So
that's great, because Kindle is available on the iPhone and iPad and things, but for people who want maybe a different solution, Kindle is worth maybe checking out, and maybe for
absolutely.
me, a tech
and the
person
new
revisiting.
e-reader. Yeah, and the new e-reader from
Yes.
the Library of Congress program, for people that get that, it can pair to your iPhone or a tablet, and then it can serve as a Braille display. So, the days when people said I can't afford a Braille display that I can use with my iPhone have kind of gone away. The e-readers that the Library of Congress distributes they're not note takers. They are not editors. They are strictly readers, but they will read what your screen shows on an iPhone or an iPad, and you can do a lot with them. So if somebody was thinking, I wish I could get a Braille display, perhaps your state is one of them that has those. They're rolling them out still, so some states don't have them, but I would say more states do than do not. So if you're interested, you should reach out to your Braille and Talking Book Library program and ask them about the e-reader, Braille e-readers from the Library of Congress.
All right.
First,
Yep.
Hi, Kim. Lord,
Sorry,
yes.
I had a major coughing fit and now I can't talk, but
Oh, no.
I got my e-reader a week ago and I
Ooh.
finally unpacked it yesterday, and it is the coolest thing, except for I'm having BARD issues because I don't know. But I was able to download 3 Bookshare books last night, and I read 2 of them,
Wow.
like 2 chapters in each of them. So
That's terrific.
it's fabulous.
Did
And
you get the HumanWare one or the ZoomX?
I got the HumanWare one.
Okay, all right, yeah, because there's 2 models that
Yeah,
are being distributed around the country. So
yeah.
my library, the Perkins Library, supports the ZoomX e-reader, which is a new
Oh.
device, newer device, but it does exactly the same things that the HumanWare one does. So
And I just would like to say that Braille is, I think, becoming more and more critical for people, and it's becoming more and more available, which is nice.
yes,
And I think it's easier to read sometimes on a Braille display
yes,
than in hard copy. So
I totally agree with that. And a lot of people I talk to who express some frustration that it's really hard to read very much in the magazines or the Braille books they got from the library. I said, well, maybe you should try an e-reader, because tracking is one of the hardest things in Braille to do. And if you only have one line, you don't have to worry about tracking. So you can focus on the reading rather than the tracking. And that's usually the thing that gets new Braille readers, is it's just hard to track at the beginning. So I'm a big proponent of the Braille e-readers and getting them out to people who are Braille readers. And hopefully some of your listeners to this program will reach out and be able to get that technology that's available for free, just like the digital players from the Library of Congress are free of charge. So
All right, great. And I am using Braille to facilitate this meeting. So all
yes.
about Braille. Um, wondering if a question here, wondering if the Perkins Library has any seminars. So they're saying that the New York Public Library has their Talking Book program has an assistive technology department, and they've hosted several seminars virtually. Has Perkins done anything in that space?
We have, and I just want to do a big shout out to Chancey Fleet and her team at the New York Andrew High School Library, because they do a phenomenal job of remote based and in library trainings, workshops, panels, all kinds of great things. And so they're my model to emulate. So the pandemic helped the Perkins Library to really pivot, because as it did with a lot of organizations, it became something that we could do to connect our borrowers that couldn't get out, couldn't, hardly get anything, barely could even get their library books for a long time, for about 6 to 8 months. And we started doing our Zoom activities. We have a kind of a higher end, we call it Library Without Walls. And we've done that program. We used to do it on a conference line back in the day, more than 3 years ago, before everybody used Zoom. And so we get, authors of books that are in the collection. We've had several best-selling authors. We've had authors with disabilities come who have written books. And we do all kinds. So we do a monthly series of Library Without Walls. And we've also added a Teaching Tuesday program where we do workshops, and they can be on all kinds of topics. They might be on what's new in BARD and going through helping people to understand what's new. We're doing one in a few weeks on the Victor Stream 3, the newest models, to tell people, what are the great features, what should they be looking for, why it's kind of nicer than the Victor Stream 2nd generation, and so that people will be aware. We also do a lot of workshops on subjects that are of interest to patrons. So we just planned out a whole bunch of series this week for like the several 6 or 8 sessions into the future on a whole lot of topics, including fraud, protecting yourself against online fraud, or brain health. Some of them are health topics. So they're like programs that you would have in a public library. If you went in to watch a speaker give a lecture about the environment or something, well, we might have a similar kind of lecture when we try to tie it to a book that's in the collection that people can read. We also, so we do some technology stuff, and we do a movie matinee, audio described movie, and it's just the audio. We don't share the video. So we've got license to do that. We do some old time radio. We do like a newsline program, and we do a couple classes. We have a accessible kind of easy yoga class we do through Zoom, and we do twice a month, we do accessible online bingo through Zoom, which is very popular. I have a lot of people that come to bingo. I never knew in my career that I would become a bingo caller, but I do it once or twice a month. So for our bingo nights, and we give prizes to the winners. So it's a lot of fun. So there's fun things, there's educational things, there's just things you go to learn. Cooking classes. I'm trying to figure out how to do craft classes. So that's my next one I'm going to try to tackle, is teaching some kind of crafts class so that people can go to that.
You should
So
reach out to ACB crafters.
I am going to. I've presented to them, so I have to learn now from them and find some really great people to help me.
Before we move on, I just want to say somebody had a question. Are your classes that you mentioned open to just your patrons, or can anybody register? And then after you answer that, Lee, if you have any questions, I'd like to ask you to unmute and ask your questions. Lee is a colleague of ours.
Okay. And that's a really good question about, can other people come to our workshops? And, the beauty of Zoom is people from anywhere can join, and there really are no walls up as far as how many people can come in. So as long as my Massachusetts people can all get in, I always say there's room for others as well. So, until the day when I've got 99 people and there's only room for 100, maybe I'll have to say something. But right now, there's room, and I welcome anyone who's interested in the topics that we have available. And we do have an email list that we send out once a week that lists all of the scheduled programming for that particular week. So anyone who needs my email can send me a request to get on that list, and I'd be happy to make sure you get added and you can join any of our programming.
Yes, we do have someone asking how they can join, hear about those calls. So
I don't know if sometimes Zoom calls don't like the presenters to give that information. I'm perfectly okay giving it if you want me to do that and it helps you. So you just let me know which way you want to handle.
Yeah, we usually say if people have a LinkedIn or some way to reach out that way, but if you don't and you want to give your email, that's fine. So you can go ahead.
Okay. Well, how about if I give it now and then I give it at the end to make sure that people can hear it. So I'm going to give my email, because that's the fastest way to get me. I am on LinkedIn, but I'm not always on LinkedIn. So I'm practically always on email. So that's a good way to reach me and connect more quickly. So it's my name. It's Kim, Kim .Charlson, CHARLSON @perkins.org. And I'll say it again at the end. So.
All right. And I just put that in chat as well.
Great.
All right. Why don't I see we have a hand raised. We do have some participants tonight. We do prefer that people put their questions in chat, but if you are not able to do that, I will go over here, and here we have a hand raised. And of course, those of you on the telephone, feel free to raise your hand if you wish to ask a question for Kim, since we know that the chat is not accessible for you. If you're on the phone and wish to raise your hand, that command is *9. All right, so Deanna. should
Hey,
be able
Kim.
to.
Hi.
Hi, Kim. Actually, I was just going to reinforce what you said by saying that I was invited to present at the poets group,
Yes.
the poetry group by Vicky, and I had a great deal of fun. And so I will send you an email and get on your mailing
Perfect.
list so I can
Great.
go other times.
Yes, they would be thrilled if you showed up. We have Poetry Corner once a month, and it's got a loyal following of people who really like poetry, like-minded people, and they have a good time. And Deanna Noriega was one of our poet guests who has written poetry. She shared her poetry. She talked about her journey with poetry and writing, and that was a very popular session that we had. And my borrowers love to hear from other people with disabilities about what they're doing. And so
Yeah,
we've
I
had
also
a deaf-blind poet came to our group
yes.
as well. He was very good.
So the thing that I also wanted to say was that when Kim was working at the Talking Book and Braille services, I joined the board of trustees over the whole library system. And because I got an appeal from the director at the time that there was nobody that was speaking for patrons on that board of trustees, and they handled all the money for all the libraries in the state. And she felt that Talking Book and Braille services was sort of like the ugly stepchild. So I joined that board and got to go and meet Kim on the job and become a good friend of her dogs. And it was a lot of fun. And I think that even if you don't go and get your master's and become a library science, there are ways to become active in the National Library Service by serving on advisory boards. That was a trustee board, so we actually voted on who got money. And I fought very hard for Talking Book and Braille services while I served.
That's great. And it's a very good point, Deanna, that most of the Braille and Talking Book libraries around the country do have advisory boards. And it's a great way to get involved, to kind of get closer to the operational level and the policy level at libraries, rather than just going to your mailbox and getting the books out of, that come in the mail every day, or downloading your BARD books. It's a closer connection. And if you really have an interest in the field of library work, as I've talked about, there's a lot of opportunities that don't require a master's degree in library science to get in the door. And, I've talked about the assistive technology. Braille is another way to get in the door. If you have Braille skills, that's wonderful. You know how to run a Braille embosser, you know how to translate files. You could get additional certification in the Braille area as a transcriber, a certified NLS transcriber, or as a proofreader. Those are all wonderful credentials that can help you if you have Braille skills and would want to pursue something in that direction as well.
And I apologize, Lee, my colleague, I know Lori said we wanted to take a question or two from you. So do you have any questions you'd like to ask him? Sorry about that.
I do.
Hi.
Hi, Kim. It's Lee Huffman. Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good. Hey, my question is really I have sort of two questions, and they're really going to go back to your role as an executive director.
Mhm.
And you had said earlier that you have a staff of about 35 people or so, and you have sometimes the opportunity to hire people who are blind or who have low vision. And just for our listeners, our participants today, what specific either characteristics or skills do you look for in those particular folks who are applying, people who are blind or who have low vision? What do you look for in them?
I think that's a great question.
To say, hey, I want you to work for me.
Yeah. I do. I look for somebody who can independently travel, who gets around the building. I usually kind of do a tour with them, and I zip around my building because I know it, but I also am kind of observing how they're following me or not following me. And I'll talk about, how did you get here today? And kind of just some shared experience kind of things. Do you, bus, subway, paratransit, what's your ride ticket kind of thing. And I look for, note-taking skills, writing skills. I'm always thrilled to see somebody who has strong Braille skills. Three out of the 8 staff I have super strong Braille skills. And one of them is working in the Braille department. Another one is working supporting the tech support for the Braille e-reader. And the other one uses Braille and technology all the time for things she does in her job. So I'm looking for people who have those tech skills, Braille skills, writing skills, independent note-taking. That is a big one for me. I'm a fan of, recording things when it's appropriate, but when it comes to taking a message or, somebody's got to pass on a message, I want to see my team, using email or something like that to send, or texting to send me that message. Because I don't want things, having to rely on dictation and they spelled somebody's name wrong, that kind of stuff. So, I really want people to be problem solvers. I don't want them to go, well, I can't write this down. I don't have something. I want them to figure out how they are going to do it, not how they can't do it. So I said before, I have pretty high expectations of myself, but high expectations of the people that I'm going to hire. I put my trust and my faith and my confidence in them to get their job done for me. And I'm fortunate that not very many people in my working career have let me down. So I'm happy to say that.
That's a great answer. And I think it was it really caught me when you were speaking earlier. And when you were talking about the hiring process and you said you let them know right up front, I have very high expectations of you. And I think that that's something, all employers should let them know, whoever they hire in whatever job, no matter what the job is, to let them know I've got very high expectations for you.
Yeah.
And my last question really is, I've been in the blindness business for about 17 years. I know that you've been in for a while. You said yourself, what do you wish you had known? If you could tell yourself now, take the knowledge you have now and go back and tell Kim back in the beginning, what advice would you give for yourself?
Well,
just starting out.
That's a really interesting question. I certainly would tell myself to do more with assistive technology. I can use it. I can do what I need to do, but I'm not a, get under the hood and know all the nitty-gritty about my technology. And now at the level where I'm working, I don't have a lot of time to go and figure out how to be a super wonderful Zoom host. Or how to make Zoom sing. I know how to use it to get the job done, but I don't know a lot of the bells and whistles. And I wish I had more time and I had learned more of the bells and whistles when I had the opportunity to do that. So that's one thing, because the busier you get, the less time you have to train yourself. And I tell my staff all the time that training is really important, and I will support you if there's courses you need, if there's seminars you want to go to. I say that to them, but I'm really, really bad about doing the same thing for myself. So, but I just think training is another area that, don't think, oh, well, I know how to use a screen reader. I know how to use JAWS. I'm all set. Well, every time there's an upgrade of JAWS, there's so many things to learn, and that could be really, really helpful on your job. And I think it's important to take some time and to figure out what those things are and to add them to your toolbox. So you can be like the fastest, bestest super kid in doing whatever you do, because you know how to make JAWS sing. And that's what I wish I knew how to do, is make JAWS sing. I just managed to get the job done, and I wish I could do better at that.
Well, thank you. Those were great answers. I appreciate it.
So Kim, along those lines, we had a question come in chat about, what is some of the technology you use at work? You mentioned Braille and things. Can you talk a little bit about what technology, and if you use any embossers or how much you use Braille in your work? So,
well, I'm lucky. I mean, I have a personal embosser, at home, but most of the time my embossing gets done at the office. So we have a Braille production program at the Perkins Library, and I have a Braille production specialist who does, books and materials and, theater programs and menus and all that kind of stuff that need to get put into Braille. And we've been running 3 enabling technology Braille 150s, which were pretty fast Braille embossers from the enabling humanware line of Braille embossers. But I needed something better, bigger, faster, especially faster. And we just got, and it's a very expensive embosser, but we just got a Braille 450. And a Braille is manufactured in Norway, but it is truly the fastest Braille embosser I have ever seen. It shoots out like 3 pages in 2 seconds. It is amazingly fast.
It's also the most expensive I've ever seen. So I know
it's $32,000 plus like $2,500 for shipping.
Yeah, not one that you buy if you're looking for the personal market. No.
Yeah, exactly. I have a personal one at home that was like, I don't know, $1,600 or something that can do graphics. I also am a huge fan of Braille graphics, tactile graphics. And so, but when it's part of the library program, we're doing like 50, 60 copies of things sometimes. So the fast one was really important, but it took me 20 years to get to the place where we bought a fast one. We were running multiple semi-fast ones for a long time, but now we've kind of notched it up, and we now have a Braille, and it is incredible. But the humanware line of embossers are all very good. I also have a View Plus embosser. So there's a lot of great technology. You don't have to spend $32,000 to get a good Braille embosser, thank goodness. No. So, and the one I have here at home is little, because I didn't have a lot of space for something really big. So, and I don't even remember its name, but it's a View Plus unit that does tactile graphics. So, because I wanted to have one that I could emboss graphics on. So.
And Kim, I just want to give you the opportunity. You also have a book on making graphics with a Braille writer.
I do.
And I, as somebody who used to think she was so cool taking the word Andy and making a box at 6 years old. Have to say, I love your book.
Thank you.
That being said, I did emboss a bunch of pictures of trains and snowmen and something else, I forget what, and sent them into school with my grandson, who's in 2nd grade, and the class absolutely loved them. So I'm just wondering if you wanted to share a little about that book, and can people still get it?
Yes. Yeah, it's still available for sale on the Perkins website, and I can give that web address. It's perkins.org/products. The Perkins Library, we sell, my book is entitled Drawing with Your Perkins Brailler. And it's a book that gives you step-by-step instructions to using your Perkins Brailler. You follow the directions meticulously. You have to do everything exactly the way, it's like paint by the numbers. You have to do it exactly the way it's described to you. And when you take that out of the Brailler and you show someone sighted, they're going to go, oh, it's a train. That's cool. I can remember when I was a kid, this happened both when I could still see enough to draw little pictures. I would draw a picture and I'd show it to somebody and they'd go, oh, isn't that sweet? That is so cute. And you could just tell they didn't have a clue what I drew. But they wanted to be supportive and nice. And so I wanted to make sure my book would give people the experience that I was always hoping I would get, which is, wow, that's a really cool cat. You drew a cat with Braille dots. And that's what happens if you use my book. There's animal pictures in it. There's dogs, there's a cat, there's a teddy bear, there's an elephant, which is one of the harder drawings in the book. a bird on a branch. Then I have holiday drawings too. The Christmas tree is quite famous. The snowman is one of my favorites. You can do hearts, you can do shamrocks for St. Patty's Day. The flags are popular too for the 4th of July. And there's a bell, and the hardest drawing in the entire book is an angel. It's in the Christmas section. There's an angel with a halo and flowy robes and wings and all that kind of stuff. And it's probably the hardest picture of all. But my book is really popular. When COVID happened, I got a lot of people saying, can you do a workshop? And I used to say, oh yeah, I have to do those in person. I don't see how I could ever do them, over the phone or on Zoom. Well, finally, the Brailleist Foundation in the United Kingdom finally talked me into doing it. And I did a holiday session with this year, but was a repeat performance. They asked me to come back because they had so much fun a year ago when I did it. And we made the Christmas tree. This year, I made a menorah. That was a original that I just designed for their workshop because I wanted to be a little more diverse and reflect other religions and other celebrations. And I also made a candy cane, which I thought was really cute. And I said, well, we're going to make a candy cane. And they said, a what? And I said, a candy cane, with the stripes on it for Christmas. And we go, oh, we don't do candy canes in England. We have rock candy. And I said, well, I guess you're all honorary Americans because you're going to do a candy cane today. So I had no idea that they don't have candy canes for Christmas is like a popular Christmas thing. They have rock candy, they call it. So
can you give the name of that book again? And
absolutely,
I'm going to put that in the chat. And you said it too fast and I couldn't write it down.
It's Drawing with Your Perkins Brailler. And it's available online for order. It's at perkins.org/products. And it's listed there as one of Perkins publications, or you can go to perkins.org and search Drawing with Your Perkins Brailler, and it will also pop up. And I think it's $24.99. And that's a Braille version with the actual Braille pictures in the book. And the large print version also has the Braille pictures in the book. So that was a real important point to me when we started to produce the books, that they had to have the actual pictures so that a Braille reader would be able to, kind of have a sense of what am I going to be making? So you could actually look at the drawing, then you can follow the directions and you can create the drawing and you can compare them to make sure that, oh, it looks the same. I'm really happy I followed all the directions and it looks right. So people really, really like it. I think I checked early in the week and the Braille version might be out of stock, but we're about to replenish the stock. So people maybe give us a couple weeks if they're interested in purchasing it. But I have a lot of followers around Braille drawings. People get into it and they start to create their own, and then they send me the directions and say, I have a place on the Perkins website where I've actually posted a lot of submissions I've gotten from people who go beyond my book and start creating their own drawings, which is the ultimate compliment to somebody in a creative vent that, others have taken what I've done and they're expanding on it, and it gives me a place to post them for people, which I think is fun.
And we only have a few more minutes left. I was just wondering, before we check for any more questions, if there was anything that you haven't had a chance to say that you might want to mention.
Yeah,
maybe since you're so involved in advocacy,
that's exactly
you could
where I was going to
talk
go.
a little about that. So
yeah, so I do. I want to talk a little bit about my interest, my role in advocacy, because if you were here at the beginning, you heard me say I originally had wanted to become an attorney and work on civil rights issues and disability rights issues. So I don't do that in my day-to-day job, but I do that in my advocacy life. I'm active and in fact, the immediate past president of the American Council of the Blind. And so I do a lot of advocacy. Advocacy, probably the most recent topics that I've worked really hard on. In 2022, one of the big things I worked on directly was to make COVID tests accessible for people who are blind or have low vision. In early 2022, there were all those free tests that came out and none of them were accessible. And ACB and other blindness organizations wrote the Biden administration and the National Institute on Health. And we said, you're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars giving COVID tests, home COVID tests to people, which is wonderful. We should be doing that. But you have totally left out the blindness population, or even people with dexterity disabilities. It was so complicated to do a COVID test. So I still to this day am amazed that our message got through, and it got through at a pretty high level. The National Institute of Health was instructed to do whatever was necessary to identify and find some kind of accessible COVID tests, which they did. The Illume test, they ended up purchasing a lot of those, and blind people could order their free, more accessible test. It required a smartphone, so not everybody could do it, but it was a step in the right direction. And what it really has done long range, beyond just making COVID tests more accessible, is that it's created a whole infrastructure at the National Institutes of Health around the concept of accessibility and home diagnostic testing. So, home testing is not new. There's been pregnancy tests for years, decades, and they aren't really accessible. Well, now there's a lot of other kinds of home-based diagnostic tests, and the people at the National Institutes of Health have developed guidelines and standards for pharmaceutical companies that are creating new tests and accessibility and directions that are easy to understand. That's all been worked into their protocols now. So future tests in other kinds of areas I think we're going to see accessibility being upfront and very visible in, colorectal testing. There's kidney function testing. There's all sorts of diagnostic tests that are done at home. And this is just the first step, but it was a major one. And the government did it. They put a lot of money behind it, and they've done it in less than 10 months. And, who knew the government could do something quickly? We always laugh about how long it takes government to do something. But this time they actually did it, and they did it fast, and it amazed me. So I'm really proud of that work, because it's going to make a very substantial long-range difference. And I guess what I would say about advocacy is it has been such a powerful tool for me as an executive, because, it's certainly contacts are important, and relationship building. That's probably another thing that I think is super important for people to do, is build their contact list, build their relationships, write down names and people you talk to, and remember them. For you never know when the something you need to know, that's the right person you need to contact, and you have to figure out, okay, who were they? What was their name? How do I find them? So but I think relationship building is huge. I think that a lot of the work that I have done in my advocacy world helped me not to be afraid of things in my career world. A lot of people shy away from number things, like being the treasurer of a club. You don't have to be the treasurer of like a 50,000 member organization, but even being the treasurer of a club can give you some really great experience managing money, dealing with banks, writing checks, paying bills, sending out dues letters. there's a lot of problem solving there, but you know, it gave me a lot of experience handling money. And so when I got to the point where I was responsible for preparing budgets and doing that kind of thing, you know, I have Excel skills, I can do that. And it wasn't so daunting for me to think about, oh, well, I've done this before. I've worked on a budget for ACB or for my local chapter or something like that. So you can really get a lot of great life skills through volunteer work. And
Yes.
it's also impressive to have volunteer work on your resume, that you were doing things, that you were busy, you had activities that you were doing. That impresses me as a hiring manager. I look for, you know, I want to know what are you doing outside of what you think is the 9-to-5 job. So it's a real valuable skill. Advocacy is an important skill. Self-advocacy, as well as advocacy for the bigger blindness community, is really, really important. So
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
Thank you so much, Kim. And we are out of time.
Well, let me give my email one more time. I've really enjoyed being here with you guys and answering your questions. And thank you so much for the honor of being here. And if people want to reach out to me, again, my email is Kim, Kim .Charlson, CHARLSON @perkins.org. So thank you again for the opportunity.
And Katie